Manatili po tayong nakatayo para sa pambansang awit ng Pilipinas at pagbaba ng bandila sa half-mast. Sasabayan tayo sa awit ni Mara Marasigan.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang magiging pinagsasinakanan, alam ng puso, sa higit mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyan ka ng magiging, sa mandulubin, di ka pasisigil, sa nagalang sugot sa simoy at sa langit ng bagaw, ay ginagang sulakaw, sa pagkayang minamahal, ang isang matawag mo'y tagumpay na naghihiling, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pamali matigiling. Luman ang araw ng walhagin pagsingka, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang nigaya ng kartay pag-amin, at mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Araw na lupang mapanglaw, lipos ng kadiliman, nasadlag ang kanyang buhay dahil sa'yo, bayan, ang kanyang simulaing tigmak ng dugo't luha ay dapat nating itabuyod hanggang sa wakas.
Manatili po tayong nakatayo at tinatawagan po natin si Father Ramon Gabriel Coronel, MDJ, at si Attorney Bantuas Maulana Lukman para sa ating invocation at punang panalangin.
O amang Diyos na makapangyarihan, amang Diyos na may alam, amang Diyos na di kailanman mabibigyan ng pangalan. Napakarami nating binabanggit tungkol sa ating Ama. Sa Biblia nakasaad na siya ang pag-ibig, siya ay katwiran, siya ay katotohanan, siya ay katarungan, siya ay daan, siya ay buhay, siya ay katotohanan. But who shall climb the mountain of the Lord? Sino ang makakakita sa pagmumukha ng Panginoon? Sino ang pwedeng humarap sa kanyang kabanalan? Ang taong may malinis na kamay at may pusong dalisay. Yung mga hindi naghahangad ng walang katuturan. Yung mga hindi nagsisinungaling at nanunuba ng kanyang kapwa. Mga kapatid, totoo ngang Allahu Akbar, ang Diyos ay lublang dakila sa anumang pangalan na maaari natin ibigay sa Kanya. Kaya sino may karapatang humarap sa harap ng Diyos na walang pangalan? Nasasaid din sa ating banal na kasulatan, yung mga naninindigan sa katuwiran, nakikiisa sa mga dumaraing para sa gustong pamamalakad at sapat na pamumuhay. Yung mga nagpapagalingan, nagpapahilom sa mga sugat ng paniniil, panaghoy ng mga inaapi at sigaw ng mga sinasaktan. Kay tagal nang naghahangad ang ating mga puso sa pagdating ng Panginoon. Siya ang ating pag-asa, siya ang ating kanlungan. Sa puso lamang niya tayo makahahanap ng galak at tayo'y naniniwala at nananalig sa kanyang banal na pangalan. Winika din ni San Pablo Apostol, I consider the sufferings of the present time as nothing compared with the glory to be revealed to us. Libo-libo man laksa-laksa, yuta-yuta ang paghihirap na ating dinaranas. Maihahambing lamang ito sa panaghoy at paninigaw ng isang babaeng malapit ng mga anak. Makahalo ang tuwa at galak, subalit lubos pa ring umaasa na darating ang bukas na kulay rosas at darating ang ginhawa. We hope, we groan with ourselves as we wait for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. At alam din natin na kahit na ano pang hirap, ano pang pagtitiis ang dapat nating danasin, the souls of the just are in the hand of God, and no torment shall touch them. They seemed in the view of the foolish to be dead, and their passing away was thought an affliction, and their going forth from us utter destruction. But they are in peace. They are in peace. Presiding Alonto, David Borja, Licetas Perez, Mindaluz Quesada, Remberto de la Paz, Juan Escador, be at peace. Salam, shalom. Be at peace sapagkat ang sinimulan nyo ay ipagpapatuloy namin. Huwag kayong mabahala sapagkat patid ng Diyos na ang katotohanan, ang katarungan at katwiran ay mismo niyang pangalan at ang Diyos ay walang hanggan. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. At hindi lamang yon, alam natin that the wicked shall receive a punishment to match their thoughts, since they neglected righteousness and forsook the Lord. For those who despise wisdom, they are doomed. Vain is their hope, fruitless their labors, and worthless their works. Mga kapatid, Basiding, David Nicetas, Mindaluz, Remberto, Juan Escandor, be at peace sapagkat may araw din sila. Siya nawa.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Amen. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, Ya Allah, you have told us to ask you for whatever we need. You said that if we ask, it will be given. If we seek, we will find. If we knock, the door will be open to us. Today, we honor the lives of all those brave souls who gave their life for the cause of freedom and the love of country and for the Filipino people. Bless their soul as we honor them, Ya Allah, Ya Rabbi, Ya Rahman. We ask you, Ya Allah, to help those of us who are the recipients of their sacrifice to never forget them and to use their shining example of love for their fellow man in our own lives. Ya Allah, the most merciful, the most beneficent, we ask for the gift of wisdom today. Give us clear guidance, Ya Allah. As we submit ourselves today to you, we know that you will direct our path, and we can have confidence that your direction is always the best way to go. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanat wa fil akhirati hasanat wa qina adhaban nar wa qina al jannata ma'al abrar ya aziz ya ghafar ya rabbal alamin. Subhana rabbiyata ma yasifun wa salamu alal mursalin walhamdulillah. Hiras ya Allah. Amin.
Pwede na po tayong magsiupo and may we invite Rojo to give us some basic house rules for this morning ceremony.
Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Ako po si Rojo, isa sa mga museum staff dito sa Bantayog. May ilang health protocols lang po tayo na ipatutupad upang mas maging ligtas tayo dito. Una po, panatilihin po nating nakalagay yung mask sa ating ilong at bibig na nakatakip upang wag po natin gawing headband o kaya ilagay sa baba, itakip sa baba para, ayun po, mas. Pangalawa po, yung social distancing po natin. Panatilihin po natin mga 1 metro or mas maganda kung higit pa. Pangatlo po, iwasan po natin munang makipagbeso-beso o kaya makipagyakapan sa ating mga kaibigan o kaya kakilala. At kung hindi naman po may iwasan, meron po tayong mga alcohol dyan at saka mga pang-spray upang mas safe tayo. Mas mabuti na po yung nag-iingat. Idagdag ko na rin po yung mga inaapakan po natin dyan. Konting ingat po kasi may mga nakausling semento. Ayun po. At sa mga gusto pong mag-CR, doon po sa gilid ng canteen, andyan po yung CR natin. Sa tabi ng klinika ng Bantayog. Yun lang po. Marami pong salamat.
Maraming salamat, Rojo, for reminders. Ako po si Ed de la Torre at ang aking co-MC ay si
Met Jimenez po.
pareho po kaming members of the Board of Trustees ng Bantayog ng mga Bayani. Ngayong araw po ay pinagdiriwang natin ang Andres Bonifacio Day at ito rin ang taon-taong araw ng pagkilala sa kabayanihan ng mga tumutol sa diktadura sa ating bansa. Taon-taon nagtitipon tayo dito sa Bantayog para magbigay dangal sa mga martir at bayani na ang pangalan ay nasa ating Bantayog Wall of Remembrance. Mas marami pa, libo-libo sila. Pero kahit paano taon-taon nadadagdagan ang mga pangalan para forever po nakaukit talaga, hindi lamang sa wall, kundi sa ating puso at kaisipan. Nagtatanghal tayo sa araw na ito ng bagong pangalan. at nakikinig sa mga tagapagsalitang inimbita para mag-iwan ng pananaw at inspirasyon.
At dahil sa coronavirus na pandemic, na nakaumang pa rin sa atin, hindi ngayon madali ang magpasyang ituloy at pati dumalo sa ating taunang pagtatanghal. Pinaghahandaan nating mabuti ang mga tamang gagawin. Tatawagin natin si Roque Malyari upang magbigay ng
Tapos na. Sorry po, una yun.
pangalan.
Hindi po muna. Ngayon po, para simulan ang ating seremonya, babasahin po ni Atty. Shell Jokno ang mensahe ng ating tagapangulong si Wigberto Kababi Tanyada. Sa
Good morning to all and welcome to the annual event of Bantayog ng Mga Bayani Foundation, which we hold every year and held even in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic as our way of recognizing, remembering and honoring those Filipinos who fought and toppled the Marcos dictatorship, who helped give us back our democracy and freedom, often at great personal cost to them and their families. I regret that health considerations prevent me from being physically with you this morning. Thankfully, I am able to join you via the gift of technology. Rest assured that we will continue to guide the foundation to fulfill its sworn mission as best as possible. We have so far honored 316 individuals, and today, as we add their names to the Bantayog Wall of Remembrance, we honor 4 more. This is our symbol of commitment to keep alive their memory and the heroic role they played in our history, and to make sure that future generations of Filipinos will be inspired by their example. Today, we face familiar challenges. We seem to have faced them before: an election battle, a battle between a David and a Goliath, a battle between truth and falsehoods, and fact-twisting, between public service and self-centeredness, between democracy and tyranny. We must find our deliverance. We cannot wallow forever in poverty and
shown us that it will be difficult, maybe even dangerous, but that is the only way forward.
the kind of anti-people governance to rule over us. Never again. Maraming salamat at mabuhay tayong lahat.
Maraming salamat, Atty. Shell Jokno, sa pagbasa ng mensahe ng ating chairperson, si Kababi Tanyada. Ngayon po, babasahin po natin at i-acknowledge ang ating mga naririto, mga kamag-anak, kapamilya at mga kaibigan at kapanalig ng ating mga pinaparangalang bayani at mga martir. Batay po ito sa nasubmit sa registration, so paumanhin kung may ibang pangalang hindi mabanggit, ihabol po ninyo para ma-acknowledge po kayo. Dahil po sa health protocols, originally mga 80 ang ating ini-expect, pero lumampas na tayo ng 100. Kaya konting ingat lang po. At pangalawa, ako po'y humihingi rin paumanhin sapagkat kung mali ang aking pronunciation ng mga pangalan, ngayon ko lang mababasa. Laging excuse po ay senior citizen na naman so. Magsimula po tayo sa napaka-special pong mga panauhin na marami ay lumipad pa mula sa Mindanao para pamilya po na nakasulat rito na ang kanilang bayani at martir na gustong parangalan at kaya sila naririto ay ang ating unang pararangalang si Dato Masiding Alonto. Ito po ang mga pangalan ng mga kamag-anak, kaibigan, bisitang naririto. Una po si Sahania M. Lukman, si Halaludin M. Alonto, si Lai Nakulay Hilario. Oka, no? Anyway po, sorry ah. Si Andrea Cara Alonto. Si Prosecutor Romel M. Alonto. Si Amiral Lidasan. Si Ricky Muhammad Akil M. Mamainta. Si Mark Paz. Si Masiding Alonto Jr., si Bantuas M. Lukman, si Sampaco Alonto Mamainte, si Ruhula Alonto, si Akari M. Mangundato, si Sadat Alonto, si Muhammad Ali Rodi, si Muhammad Ali Pakasum, si Francis Legaspi, si Alaja Saraya Lukman, at si Muhammad Lukman.
Para po naman sa mga kamag-anak, kaibigan, at mga kasama ng ating pinapangaralang David Borja, si Priscilla Ang Maniques, si Christian Lloyd Magsoy, si Elmer Bong Labog, si Florian Borja, Joshua Manuel Manto, si Dayan Del Borja,
Ang susunod po ay sa pamilya ni Mindaluz Quesada. At dahil pareho silang nasa sektor ng pantalusugan, narito rin sila para kay Dr. Bobby de la Paz. Si Jane Banyes Ockelford, si Antonio Miguel, si Vicky Neri, si Angela Doloricon, si Froilan Medina, si May Quesada Medina, at si Mel Gerald. Maraming salamat.
Para po sa pamilya ni Bobby de la Paz, Idamel de la Paz Jr., Edelina P. de la Paz, Antonio Miguel de la Paz, Serenes Virtuad de la Paz, at para po sa yun po ang ating mga kasama, Silvia de la Paz, nandito mo ba? Dr. Silvia de la Paz. Okay. On the way. So, one is Candor.
Para ho sa pamilya ni Dr. Juan Escandor, naririto po si Sofia Escandor Fugen, si Phoebe Crismo, si Candy Escandor, si Matthew Liam Fugen, si Maria Teresita Escandor, si Jair Escandor. Sila po ang naririto kapamilya at kapanalig ni Dr. Juan Escandor.
Para po sa iba pang mga narito at panauhin natin na gusto magpugay, narito po ang ating kasama sa Torsi Ocampo, Louis Crismo, mga relatives na po ang iba, Hasmin Crismo, Lotario Bawagan Jr., si Tina P. Bawagan, si Neil Ligaspi, si Jerome Adonis, si Manny Cambronero, si Carlo Gualvez. Sino po ay mga HRVP na o mga human rights violation victims. At ang akin pong si Raymond Cruz, si Ira Gordula, Lorenzo Martinez, mula po sa UP, Mike Tan, ang ating pong storyteller na si Miguel Alcazaren, at si Jeanette Ifurong.
Makaragdagan pa pong hindi pa na basang mga narito ngayon, si Manuel Araneta, si Abraham Longones, si Alfredo Perez Jr., si Chera de Villanueva, si Gren Munoz, si Zania Panday, si Cara Alikpala, si Carlos Peña, si Alan Gatus, si Robert at si Warren Gallievo, si Cyril Kate Baldelion, si Chelsea Ans, si Russell Micabalo, at si Rose Bernano, si Rose Berbano, si Irma Torres de la Cruz, si Francis Joseph de la Cruz, si Gilbert Pimentel, si Ilian Padilla, si Mike Padilla, at si Victoria Segui Calizo, si Ariel Salumides, si Bobby Roldan, si Tita Luby, si Remedios Ismael, si Virginia Sakimo, si Dr. Alonto Maminte, at si Bun Maminte, at si Rustum Alonto, at si Lawrence Vera Calizo, at si Dennis Adre. Kung may mga mayahabol kong pangalan, kilalanin natin sila. Lagi natin sinasabi na pag tayo nagpaparangal sa mga yumao, ito ay hindi lang para sa kanila, kundi higit sa lahat para sa atin. Kaya sa araw pong ito, gusto nating ipagdiwang hindi lamang ang kanilang kabayanihan, kundi ang atin ring kapatiran rito. Tayo hindi magkakakilala, karamihan dito, bago pumarito. Pero sa araw na ito, pinapagbigkis po tayo sa ating damdamin at isip ng ating hindi lamang pag-unawa, pagkilala, pagpaparangal sa kanila, kundi sana ay nakatuklas tayo ng bagong paraan at batayan ng tayo nabibigkis bilang kapwa Pilipino, magkababayang nagkakaisa para sa ating pinaglaban ng ating mga bayaning, kalayaan at demokrasya at katarungan sa ating bansa.
Pini-welcome din natin si Doc Al Parong. Andito rin siya.
Okay. Okay po. Ngayon po, bilang pagkilala sa ating lahat at sa ating mga bayani, seremonya po nating parang pakinggan ang gong na dinonate po sa atin ng isang mga kaibigan natin para sa pagpaparangal. Ngayon po, taon-taon, bago sa pagpaparangal mismo ng ating mga bayani at martir, tayo po'y nag-iimbita ng isang panauhing pandangal para magbigay ng mensahe. At ang ating pong iniimbita at nagpapasalamat kung sila po ay available sa kanilang schedule, ay mga kaibigan natin, kakilala, hinahangaan, na hinihiling natin na magbigay ng ilang mensahe para sa ating natitipon dito. Para ipakilala ang ating panauhing pandangal, tatawagin natin po ang ating member rin po ng Bantayog Board of Trustees na si Dr. Juan Perez III para ipakilala ang ating panauhing pandangal.
Kay Bantayog ng mga Bayani Board of Trustees Chair, Senator Bobby Tanyada, kay Vice Chair Bobby Malay, mga miyembro ng Board of Trustees, families, relatives, and friends of the martyrs and heroes who fought the Marcos dictatorship. Isang magandang umaga sa ating lahat. Our guest of honor and speaker at Bantayog's annual honoring of martyrs and heroes is, simply put, a public health worker who is also a cardiologist and clinical pharmacologist, a graduate of the UP College of Medicine, who trained in PGH, Harvard Med School, Massachusetts General Hospital. Her most recent appointment in government were her selection as successively as DSWD Secretary and Health Secretary up to June 2010. I have had the privilege of working with her in the last 7 years to implement the Responsible Parenthood Reproductive Health Law. And she is also currently the chair of the National Implementation Team of this law, serving 3 secretaries of health successively. Today, she speaks for the health sector like no other, unequivocally taking the side of professionalism and service to the people. And she, the people of an embattled but unbowed health sector. Friends, Dr. Esperanza S.P. Cabral.
Salamat, GP, sa iyong magandang introduction. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Pasensya na po kayo at medyo English yung aking speech ngayon. Mahihirapan po ako mag-translate ng lahat na ito sa Tagalog. Good morning, everybody. I am privileged to have been invited and very pleased to join you at the annual honoring of martyrs and heroes in the people's resistance to dictatorship today. Thank you to the Bayani ng Bantayog ng mga Bayani Foundation for the invitation. And warm greetings to the trustees and members of the foundation, as well as to all of you who are present today. As I understand it, the Bantayog ng mga Bayani is a memorial designed to honor all of those who struggled against the 1972 martial law regime and who maintained a stance that is uncompromising against Marcos and the Marcos dictatorship. While the initial intent had been to honor victims who had been martyred, the foundation now honors people who advocated freedom, justice, and democracy, who lived beyond the people power revolution. The martyrs and heroes of the martial law days take intensified significance these days, when after more than 30 years, the specter that haunts those of us who lived through the Marcos regime is that of a dynasty poised to take power again. It seems that we are going to need our heroes now more than ever before. I am hoping the coming days will not see more martyrs added to the list. As it is, names from the struggle of decades ago are still being added to the wall of remembrance. Which brings us to those we honor today. Nicetas Perez, Lucena youth activist; David Borja, Iligan labor leader; Dato Masiding Alonto, Muslim leader; and Minda Luz Quesada, nurse, patriot, leader, and someone I knew and admire. I also have some connection to two physicians who are being given special recognition today, Bobby de la Paz and Johnny Escandor. I did not have the good fortune of knowing Bobby de la Paz. I actually may have taught him, I don't know, personally, but I have the privilege of being associated with his wife, Sylvia, and some of his friends and relatives. As for Johnny Escandor, well, he was my classmate in medical school. Although it is with regret that I realize that I actually did not know him then. Even so, until much later when he, like Bobby, became legend. I read through the short articles provided to me on the lives of Nicetas Perez, David Borja, and Datu Masiding Alonto, and even those of Minda, Bobby, and Johnny. And I am reminded of a paper on what makes a hero. Heroism is defined as an activity with several parts. First, it is performed in service to others in need, whether that's a person, group, or community, or in defense of certain ideals. Second, it is engaged in voluntarily, even in military contexts, as heroism remains an act that goes beyond something required by military duty. Third, a heroic act is one performed with recognition of possible risks and costs, be they to one's physical health or personal reputation, in which the actor is willing to accept anticipated sacrifice. Finally, it is performed without external gain anticipated at the time of the act. Simply put, then, the key to heroism is a concern for other people in need, a concern to defend a moral cause, knowing there is a personal risk, done without expectation of reward. By that definition, then, heroism doesn't always involve a serious risk. What seems clear, however, is that heroism often starts with compassion. A hero is someone who does good and courageous things for other people without being asked to. someone who has a sense of justice and goodness and acts upon the same. So, what about frontline workers dealing with the risk of COVID-19 infection? And you will forgive me for relating heroism to the frontline health workers, since I am a doctor after all. But typically, heroism has been ascribed to people who lived lives dedicated to a cause. The Jose Rizals, the Ninoy Aquinos. Now we are perhaps recognizing that the title may be deserved by many more people who are genuinely putting themselves at risk, which is clearly the case for healthcare workers in particular now. Risk like this was never in their job description. What's more, they are doing it every day. That's heroism with a capital H. The heroes of the pandemic are, of course, many. They are not only doctors or nurses or other healthcare workers. They are not even healthcare workers, although they are who we think of them when we say frontline workers. So let me try and discuss heroism in the context of what healthcare workers, particularly physicians and nurses, experienced and are still experiencing in the COVID pandemic. Every 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we eagerly wait for word from the DOH, hoping that they would tell us that COVID-19 is in retreat. As of a few days ago, the number of COVID cases in the country has exceeded 2.8 million, with more than 48,000 dead. Everybody hopes that we are seeing the end of the pandemic, with more and more people getting vaccinated. But the consequences of COVID-19 are indisputable, not just in the terms of cases and number of deaths, in the terms of number of cases and number of dead, but in the worst economic crisis in Southeast Asia, if not the world. More than 4,000 additional jobless Filipinos during the worst of the community lockdown, and an increase in the poverty incidence from 17% to 20%. Mercifully, COVID-19 has also triggered immense displays of altruistic behavior, with people coming to the aid of frontliners and those affected by the pandemic. In many ways, the pandemic brought people together, even as it tore them asunder, generating a deeper understanding that our lives are interlinked and that we could all be at risk of getting sick and dying if not for the collective effort of all to keep each other safe. But that suffering is really not healthcare workers. Fortunately, as hard and difficult as it is, they are the ones taking care of those who are sick instead of the reverse. From a broader perspective, it is also not true that the virus does not discriminate. Indeed, it is easily observable that the virus follows deep-rooted patterns of health inequities. Certainly, those same underprivileged groups have higher risks of becoming infected or dying of COVID-19, reflecting poorer access to health care and a higher underlying burden of disease that predisposes them to worse outcomes. When these marginalized groups get the virus, they often have to beg and scrounge around to buy the medicines that they cannot afford. It turns out that our efforts to reduce transmission of the disease, including the longest lockdown in the world, as well as our attempts to heal those who have been stricken with medicines and procedures not within their reach, has widened the health divide some more. Where does compassion factor in all of these? The concept of compassion is ancient, rooted in many spiritual and moral philosophical traditions. Compassion is central to Christian beliefs, reflected in the story of the Good Samaritan, for example. It is also embedded in many religions and even in pagan and atheistic communities. Compassion comes from the Latin word compati, meaning to suffer with, and the standard dictionary definition of compassion is a feeling of deep sympathy and sorrow for another, accompanied by a strong desire to alleviate suffering. That last phrase, alleviate suffering, animates or should animate frontliners' thinkings about illness and suffering, not just in the time of COVID, but throughout their active professional life and beyond. Martin Luther King enjoins us to see compassion as motivating us not to fling a coin to a beggar, but to see that the edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. Compassion pushes us to understand how we have contributed to the situation and asks how we can construct it better. Not because we may suffer, but because others are suffering, and that is not right. I venture to say that compassion started Minda, Bobby, and Johnny on the road to heroism, as it did Nicetas, David, and Datu Masiding. Minda's daughter described her as a quintessential helper who would take a beggar into their house, feed him, and allow him the dignity of working for the money she gave him. Johnny was a doctor, dedicated to healing his patients, unmindful of any material reward. Bobby was a doctor who did not limit himself to treating disease, but went to live with the people. Niceta showed compassion for others at an early age and would ask his mother to show charity to poor people who asked for help. Datu Masuding was educated and well off, but lamented how backward and poor the Moro people were. David opened his house to activists who needed a safe place, and he is remembered as someone who always welcomed them and offered to help despite the risks to himself and his family. Just like the heroes we are honoring today, these frontline healthcare workers did not know that they would be called to do, and yet they all rose to the occasion. I do not know a single frontline health worker who shirked from their responsibility, even though they knew the risks they were taking. What this suggests is that every one of us can be a hero, and that act of heroism doesn't just arrive from truly exceptional people, but from people placed in the right circumstance, given the necessary tools to transform compassion into heroic action. Let us all steer our inner heroes awake. The times call for it yet again. Thank you very much.
Isa pong pasasalamat kay Dr. Cabral sa kanya pong pagpapaunlak sa atin. At marami pong salamat na sa inyong pagdating at maging panahon. Maraming salamat, Dr. Cabral.
Ngayon po, meron tayong ilang mensahe ng ilang hindi nakaparito pero nais magpaabot ng kanilang pagbati at mensahe sa ipe-play po sa video galing kay Don Arce, kay Coco Taka at kay Eta Rosales.
Ating pakinggan ang alay ng isang anak sa kanyang ina na isa sa mga itatanghal natin ngayon bilang bayani sa pagtutol sa diktadura. Si Desa Quezada Palm, ang isa sa mga ngalang awit ng Petit Burgess, at ang isa ay Minda.
Magandang araw po sa inyong lahat. Ako po si Liwayway Arce, anak po ni Merardo Arce, isa po sa mga martir at bayani. At sa ngalan po ng iba pang second generation na mga anak, kaanak ng mga martir at bayani natin, ako po ay inatasan ngayon na magbigay ng ilang mensahe, ng isang mensahe para sa ating lahat. Sa tingin ko po, ang pinakaleksyon na natutunan ko bilang anak ng isang martir ay yung ipagpatuloy yung pagsasalita at ang diskusyon tungkol dun sa martial law at sa nangyari pa nung namatay o pinatay yung ating mga mahal sa buhay. Kasi po sa pamilya namin, hindi halos namin pinag-usapan yung nangyari sa tatay ko. Hindi po masyadong pinag-usapan sa pamilya, hindi dinidiscuss kasi masakit eh. Siguro yun yung pakiwari ko, no? Parang masyadong pinamdam ng lolo't lola ko yung nangyari at saka yung pamilya. So hindi masyadong pinag-uusapan. At sa tingin ko, ito po yung pinakamalaking pagkakamali. Yung hindi pinag-uusapan, akala it will go away. It didn't. And instead, ang nangyari, matapos ang ilang dekada, yung mga galamay na naman ng diktador, ay sila na naman ay ngayon malakas, nagsanib pwersa na sila. Marami po silang resources and they did use that time, yung panahon na tahimik tayo, akala natin tapos na yung laban, ginamit po nila pagkakataon yun para mag-regroup. At ngayon, mas malakas pa sila sa disinformation, sa historical revisionism. At bilang mga anak o kamag-anak ng mga bayani at martir natin, tayo po yung may pinakamalaking kredibilidad o gravitas para magsalita tungkol dito at laban sa diktadurya at sa kawalan ng katarungan ngayon nangyayari sa Pilipinas. So, yun po sana yung gawin natin ng pagkakataong to, yung sakit na nararamdaman natin sa pagkawala ng ating mga mahal sa buhay. Gamitin natin to para isulong yung mga gusto nilang gawin para sa bansa nila. Kasi ay hindi ka pinakamasakit is yung mawalan na lang ng saysay yung sakripisyo nila, yung pagkamatay nila. Dahil sa nangyayari sa bansa natin ngayon. Kaya ipagpatuloy natin yung laban, magtipon-tipon tayo at yung laban na yung diskurso, hindi lang po ito sa pag-rally, hindi lang din eh. Marami na pong ways para tayo ay maging aktibo sa paglaban para sa demokrasya at katarungan. Saan man tayo bahagi ng mundo, maaari natin gawin ito. At para may pagmalaki tayo din ng mga mahal natin sa buhay na nag-alay ng malaki para sa bayan, para sa pagmamahal sa bayan. So mabuhay po ang Pilipinas, mabuhay ang tayog ng mga bayani, ang mga bago nating anim na pinararangalan ngayon. At mula po sa Stonehenge sa Inglaterra, kahit po saan tayo mga Pilipino, mahalin po natin ang ating bansa at ituloy natin ang laban. Maraming pong salamat.
10 years ago today, my father was one of 11 new honorees at the Bantayog ng Mga Bayani. Among the honorees of that year, many were killed, assassinated, or died in bloody battles as they opposed the oppressive martial law regime. The heroism that you will hear about today includes stories of a brave Muslim, a labor leader from Mindanao, a youth activist, and a nurse who was also a 1986 Constitutional Convention delegate. Also this year, we will re-celebrate and re-honor the stories of two doctors previously inducted into the Bantayog in 1992 and in 1994. And for this, we choose to remember Dr. De La Paz and Dr. Escandor. It's also fitting that we celebrate and pay homage to our medical frontliners, and despite the frustrating forces behind scientific misinformation, our fearless healthcare workers continue to risk their own lives in order to save others. True heroes in their own sense. It is more critical now than ever before that we continue to celebrate these stories of real heroes of the country as movements of disinformation, the minimizing of the abuses of martial law, and the tampering of a critical free press, and also the attempts at historical revisionism have become disturbingly viral. So the fight must continue because the forces that oppress the truth and interfere with freedom and democracy are unfortunately active, well organized, and influential, especially to our youth. So join me today, along with millions of Filipinos around the world, and help congratulate and honor this year's inductees, and never forget the lessons we learned from our notorious past. Maraming salamat at mabuhay ang Pilipinas.
Sa bagay, ilang beses nyo napakinggan ito ngayon pa kayo nagsusum at iba. Due to technical problems, please wait for a little. Turn on your video. Unmute yourself. Masosol pa raw po. Maghintay ng ilang saglit po. Okay. Kasi yung minta, pwede na po siya. Sorry po, naputol pa yung ating live streaming. Mga 4 minutes lang po. In the meantime, ni-request po ako siguro na para sa mga nagtatanong, kasi kami lang yata ang, meron naman kayong programa sa inyong, dalawa na lang pong bahagi ang naghihintay. May konti po kaming espesyal na parangal sa dalawa nating members po ng Bantayog ng mga bayani, trustees at pamilya na pumanaw. At pagkatapos po nun, yung main event po natin, yung pagbasa ng parangal at pagtanggap ng katibayan ng parangal. Instructions lang po, pag ang inyo pong kamag-anak, kapamilya, kaibigan, ang pararangalan na, iniimbita po natin ang lahat ng pumarito na kapamilya, kasamahan, kaibigan, na pumarito po sa harap para habang binabasa, marami ho sa pagbasa naman ay through video, ay nakatindig po kayo rito sa likod. At manatili po kayo riyan dahil pagkatapos po ay ibibigay ng ating guest of honor kung nandito pa siya together with our Vice Chairperson po, si Bobby Malay.